We're going to go ahead and get started on panel 2. My name is Michelle Winters again. I am the Executive Director of AHS, and I'll be moderating the panel, panel number 2, which we've called Making the Numbers Work, Tools for Serving Middle-Income Households. So we had that great setup question right at the end of the last panel by Catherine, and she asked, what can we do to try to get middle-income households back into, in her question, I believe, Arlington, and then so the question for us is into this middle scale housing. How can we take the concept of mid-scale housing, which we've been calling missing middle all morning, and make sure that housing is able to serve people who have middle range incomes. I think you've got a variety of experiences. We have a really, really interesting panel with the full spectrum of development experience. So we have, the panel before was a lot about planning and policy. We'll definitely have perspectives on planning and policy on this one, but we're a more sort of development and finance focused group. We've got David DeCamp with D2 Partners. He is a former, well, I'll let you do the introductions. And then Robert Burns from City First Enterprises in Washington, D.C., Noemi Riveira from Habitat for Humanity of Northern Virginia, and Richard Donohoe from Fidelity Bank Mortgage in Northern Virginia. So we're going to get started by having some general comments. They're going to say a little bit about their background, what they have, what their experience is, and how it ties to everything that we've talked about today. We're going to go through each of them, and then we'll go and do questions and take comments. Before I get started, though, I wanted to remind everybody of two things. One, for those of you who are planners and architects here, this is approved for AICP and APA credit. So make sure that you sign in to let us know that you can get, to let everybody know that you can get those credits. So I need to let you know that. And then the other thing, and you see this whole gallery that we've had in the back, please bring your friends to our actual galleries, which are going to be on the 15th, this Saturday at Arlington Mill, and on the 25th in North Arlington at, I'm blanking. Langston Brown Community Center, thank you. And those will be a great opportunity to continue the conversation around these housing types with the members of your community and our community here. So please do what you can to bring people out to those. So we'll get started now, and go ahead, David.
Sure. Hi, I'm David DeCamp. I'm a real estate developer. Most of my practice has taken place right here in Arlington. In fact, I'm not ashamed to say that really my professional dreams and have been realized right here in Arlington, and not even far from here, right here in Clarendon. It's an extraordinary marketplace that I feel very blessed to have had the opportunity to work in. I also want to pause and say how grateful I am to be right here in the Clarendon Ballroom. This is a fantastic facility, and I love seeing it used for a purpose like this. This was the dream of a good friend of mine, Pete Flug and Nick Langman, and I love what they've done. They've taken this old, it was a Woolworth 5 and dime, and they've adaptively reused it for this purpose and made it a part of the real animated street here right in Clarendon. This is such an interesting idea, the missing middle. I read what Daniel wrote I don't know, I guess I read it about 7 or 8 months ago, and it really excited something in me because I'm not a big institutional size developer. I find myself all the time competing with those big institutional developers, and I'm trying to look for ways to compete effectively with them by looking at things they're not looking at. And I felt like the missing middle is a great opportunity to go at them where they're not particularly active, where it doesn't create the scale that typically attracts them. And so with some other partners, we've looked around not only Arlington, but across the river in D.C., and even doing some work right now in Montgomery County, Maryland, for opportunities to step in at non-institutional levels and exploit what I think is actually a bigger portion of the market than the luxury end on the one hand, which is it's very tempting to go after that luxury end. And then there's another big segment of the market, which is the subsidized portion of the market, where it takes big institutional-sized players to often operate at the tax credit structures and really understand how to operate and be effective and make a margin and be successful at the subsidized tax credit side of the deal. But I feel like in the middle here is this largely unserved market. I'm the father of 2 college-age kids that'll soon be looking for jobs and hopefully a new place to live. So we'll see how that plays out. Actually, I love them when they're around. They were around this summer. And I'd like to think that there would be an English basement style apartment available for them, and then someday a condo flat that they could maybe graduate up into. And I'm looking for those chances to do that. And oftentimes it means 4 stories or less, so you can stick-built construction, where you're at the same time, comply with whatever the zoning and planning is for the location. You also have to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act, and so you make sure you've got accessibility and still kind of keep it affordable. And there's some real adaptive ways to do that at the garden apartment scale, at that duplex, quadplex scale, where you maybe don't have to put an elevator in if you make your first floor units accessible. And those are the kind of opportunities I'm looking for. And I've got lots of investor partners who are behind me as we search for these kinds of opportunities. So this is really a timely topic, and this is a bullseye location for missing middle to work and I think still yield a margin. And my final pitch for being a for-profit developer, my feeling is if we can figure out how to do it and make some money, it's repeatable. And it'll get done more and more and more often. So I feel like the for-profit side is an important contributor to the missing middle solution.
Great, thank you. So we're going to go to Robert Burns now. Your thoughts?
Great. So good morning, everybody. It's great to be with you, and I appreciate the invitation to participate. I head up a group in DC called City First Enterprises, which I'll speak a little bit about. And secondarily, but also importantly, I sit on a national board called the Grounded Solutions Network, and on that board I serve as board president. Grounded Solutions is an organization, a nonprofit, an association that's been set up that includes groups that do community land trusts, shared equity, cooperatives, and inclusionary zoning across the country. So it's composed of local governments, nonprofits, et cetera. But I'm going to tie that national and local experience together. Through City First Enterprises, we are a community development financial institution. We also are an impact investor into affordable housing and small business in DC. But importantly in this discussion, to talk about one of the tools we use, we operate a shared equity portfolio of ownership housing in DC, 244 units currently. And we're also very active in wards 7 and 8 in DC, which traditionally, long-term, have been the most disimpoverished areas of the city, working on an effort to put together a true community land trust, which is one of the tools I'm going to talk about. So in thinking about the missing middle discussion, as we were thinking about the panel, and Michelle had extended the invite, that this is a tool that often folks don't know about. It is a little obscure, I'll admit up front. Sometimes it's a little hard to understand. But I had this diagram that has worked somewhat effectively in trying to get the message across that I had sent to Michelle. But a community land trust is an idea that has been around for many, many decades, actually originated in Britain at one point, but really started in rural areas of the country, and over the years has seen tremendous growth. But the basic idea is something that fundamentally almost strikes people as un-American, which you separate the land from the property. And you think about those in 2 different ways. But in the essence of the model, and I'll keep it short, that a land trust, which typically is a nonprofit, actually stewards the land and makes sure that it stays within its ownership within the land trust. And then an owner comes in and buys the property that's on top of the land and pays a lease to the land trust itself. So you separate the 2. And as you can imagine, especially in an area like DC, and for those that look at their assessments, the land often comprises a significant portion of what the cost of the property is. An area like DC and other high-cost markets around the country, this tool is being implemented in a number of ways. The other important part of it is the community aspect of it. These are usually organizations, and I will say usually because a lot of the models have taken on hybrid nature, where the community truly governs what happens as part of the land trust, usually in conjunction with the municipality or the county and with private or other nonprofit partners. The other aspect that I would point out is that at a national level, we at Grounded Solutions, where I sit on the board, separate from my City First role, we're seeing tremendous interest from markets like Houston that has seen rapid appreciation in prices, where the city of Houston is now working to set up its own land trust and spin it off. New York City, which is looking in 6 different neighborhoods of setting up a citywide land trust, but also cities like Detroit and Baltimore, where Baltimore, they've seen what's happened in DC proper, and they know they have a significant issue with vacant property, but they see this as a way to preserve the affordability long term. Detroit is a very similar situation where they're looking at it as a long-term solution. Detroit is actually, for the first time in many ways, seeing some neighborhoods that are starting to become hot, where prices are rapidly, for Detroit, appreciating in its various markets. The other aspect of this is important in models like this. The owner, the person that buys the property, enters into an agreement with the land trust. When they go to sell their property, they have agreed up front that they're going to share a portion of that equity with the next buyer. That also is something that typically is not heard of in a purchase transaction, but it's a way of preserving the affordability, a very important method of preserving it. I always like to say they're not producing new subsidy. You don't see it. You see subsidy shrinking at the federal level. It's becoming challenging at the local level, the distribution of CDBG and home dollars and other forms. We're fortunate that in this area we see more local subsidy being offered in Arlington County, Alexandria, Fairfax. That's also very important. But that aspect of it, that shared equity piece of it, is a very important aspect of how the model works. So I'm going to stop there just to talk about the model. In our portfolio in DC, we operate 244 units, and that's in a variety of models, all the way from single family to cooperatives. Cooperatives in the DC market, DC in general is the second largest cooperative market in the country outside of New York City. So you find a lot of cooperatives, and the cooperatives that we work with are called limited equity cooperatives, so they function around the same model. But happy to take questions later.
Great, thank you. So we're going to move on to Noemi, who's going to share Habitat Nova's experience.
Sure. So thanks for having me. Noemi Riveira. It's funny, as I'm listening to this, we moved into Arlington County because it was affordable back 32 years ago. I started out with Habitat 6 years ago. I'm originally an architect and worked in DC with large firms when DC was a hot office market. Then started with Habitat as a volunteer and quickly thought that I could use my architectural talents there, but quickly realized that they needed more of a real estate person. So that's how my position, how I transitioned into that. So Habitat for Humanity Northern Virginia is an affiliate of Habitat International, which means that we only work in Northern Virginia, so Arlington, Alexandria, Falls Church, Fairfax County, and the city of Fairfax. We do not get funding from international. We're self-funded. We do all our fundraising. We look for our properties. We're a nonprofit developer, but we're also, not only are we the developer, we're the builder. We finance our projects. And we're the lender and underwriters for our families, and we're a family service provider. So we serve families within 30 to 80% of AMI, but unfortunately we really don't serve in the lower end just because, sorry, I think I'm doing that, because of the high cost of purchasing the properties in this area and then building it. We want to make sure that our families are set up for success. So our sweet spot really is between 60 and 80%, and those are the families we typically serve, which poses a problem using local funding and federal funding because those programs are not set up for that. It's really set up for the much lower income levels. So that's where we have to fund all our projects ourselves. We are competing in many ways with the for-profit developers because we're out there looking for the properties. So as you can imagine, our pool shrinks every minute. So we get a lot of the odd lots, the properties that have some challenges, so then we have to work it through the system with the local jurisdictions. We really don't get any breaks. We still have to pay all development costs, sorry again, that everyone else has to pay. So it's challenging, but we're still managing to do that. We've done several multifamily homes, 12 units, 8 units, so in that missing middle architecturally, and serving the missing middle families as well. But it's difficult, very difficult.
Hello, I'm a native Arlingtonian, so I've lived here all my life, and it's changed a lot. That's a good reminder. It's a Woolworths. I remember the Conn's department store across the street with the Metro, so this area has changed a lot. But I've been doing lending now for 30 years, and trying to help out even lower than the missing middle has become quite a challenge. So this is quite a good idea to get a forum on financing and making it more available to help out people that are in that maybe 60, 80 to 100 AMI, which is difficult. Naomi mentioned that the lower 30% bracket to 60 is almost impossible for them to build, and for like someone comes to me, and I get them a lot. In Arlington, people come and they try to make $30,000, $40,000. They want me to get them a house, a condo, a place to move their family into. Very difficult, and that is not going to be solved because that's not even in the equation. That's not the middle. So as to you, to build the product, that's probably one solution. To have the financing in place, the county, VHDA, that's sort of where I come in and some of my expertise. I was on the affordable housing study for 3 years to try and bring some ideas to the table, and I'm glad to see the county has enacted this study, the plan. That means they're taking the first step and saying, we want to help, we want to have a plan, we want to have a footprint, a framework of how to help us get out of this situation where people can't live in a place they work. Workforce housing is an area that is big. I know in Fairfax County they have that working, and it needs to be brought up to be talked about here. People that work in the county, teachers, firefighters, EMTs, think about how great it would be to have them working and living in their area versus having them in Woodbridge, having them in Lorton, and something bad happens, they can't get here. Police in the neighborhood, but they don't make enough, so they need financing, they need housing. So all those things I think are very helpful that this is coming up, because the county is very, they're very open to this. I think they need ideas, they need maybe a little prodding, and they need the public to sort of say, hey, this is something that we can help. The reason the slide is up here, what is the missing middle? And I think people go, they don't even know this term. It's interesting you wrote the book on it, but VHDA sort of caught this, this 97 to 113, there's a down payment assistance program that the VHDA has. They came up with this sort of on their own. This is their own sort of middle, and it's interesting that they came up with this, and that maybe there are people thinking about this. If you make 97, you don't really think of that as middle, but you could get help on a grant program for a family of 2 or 113,000. So there are products out there to sort of fit into that mold. So that just goes to show that one, VHDA, Virginia Housing Development, they've said, we think they need help, and we're going to help them. This is a grant where you don't have to repay it back. So it's sort of begging the question of why aren't there other programs? Why aren't other counties sort of saying, why aren't we helping them? Why are we only helping the people that make 60,000 under, the 60% AMI? So that middle needs to be sort of addressed and filled in, and not every person is going to qualify to buy a home. It'd be great, but the fact that we don't maybe have programs to help the missing middle means that programs like this, events like this, do need to be brought up and talked about, saying someone needs to come in and put some ideas and some programs there.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to ask all of you to address, if you can, or whichever ones of you can, the question of subsidy. And so, Robert, you've mentioned a great tool that it sounds like is going on all over the country and over in DC. We also have some history of some shared equity homeownership programs here in Arlington, but it's a fairly small program. In the programs that the one that you run and that you're familiar with, how much subsidy is in that? Who can you serve? Where does the subsidy come from?
Sure. So we're fortunate in our program currently that we have some dollars that were originally designated from DC government, and we provide a $75,000 silent second on the mortgage. And it's important to note, just thinking about the financing, that we do work with local banks with a DC presence that are able to work with our prospective buyers and are able to provide a first mortgage and work with the program nuances of having the shared equity provisions in place. And actually, for a lot of folks doing the mortgage, it provides a different level of protection because we're consistently, much like Habitat, in touch with our homeowners, know what's going on. If they have trouble, they let us know. And as of today, we have not had anyone in our portfolio even fall with a 30 or 60-day delinquency. They pay on time, and it's easy to do. But that subsidy piece is an important part of what makes it work. And typically a buyer also qualifies for DC's HPAP program, which I believe in a lot of ways mirrors some of the county MyPAP program. But both of those together help on that first-time buyer piece. Interestingly, because we work with cooperatives, we track all of our homeowners in a system called Homekeeper. So each day I could actually go in and see, well, what's our average AMI, area median income that we're serving on a regular basis. So out of our portfolio of 244 right now, our average AMI is 57%. That's largely because of the cooperatives that are in the portfolio. A cooperative operates very differently than a single family home, as you can imagine, but that's it's an AMI that we're happy to serve. And interestingly, thinking about the workforce housing aspect, we've had 6 resales in our portfolio this year where an owner has sold to the next owner. And out of the 3 most recent resales, those have all been to teachers who teach in DC public schools. They also qualify for a program through DC government and the DC public school system. It's a minor piece, but you put all those pieces together, certainly helpful to be able to buy your first home.
Thank you. So Noemi, how about for Habitat? You mentioned that you do it all yourself. How does that happen?
Not easily. So what we do is once everybody knows the typical habitat model where part of the homeowner actually helps build the home. But there's a lot more that goes into that to reduce the cost. So when we purchase a property, we try to get the best price possible, obviously. But we start the development process. We use a lot of pro bono services. That's one way we cut the costs. We try to get as much pro bono labor as well. But everything, going through the development process with the local jurisdiction, that all has to be done just like any other developer. Materials, everything like that. Electrical, mechanical, all that we also pay for. So what we do is the mortgage we keep. So once a homeowner starts paying, that mortgage goes into building the next property. It's just all recycled. So our homeowners have a 30-year mortgage. They have 1% down payment, and we structure the mortgage payments so that it's just a third of their income. What we do is we know how much the house is, once it's constructed, we use the cost of construction. We do an appraisal, and they usually appraise for much more than that. We take that difference between the cost of construction and the appraisal, and that's their second silent. So they're paying whatever it is, cost to construct, structure their mortgage, 30-year mortgage based on their third of their income. And then if it's shared equity, as long as they stay there for the 30 years, the second silent is forgiven. If they have to move for some reason during the time they're paying their mortgage, we buy it back, and they get whatever they put into the home. So it's almost like a savings plan as well. They're paying their principal We don't have an interest, so they're paying their principal. They get it back if they have to move. And we did have, we haven't had any, we've only had to purchase back a handful. And much like Robert, we've only had one instance where a homeowner was in trouble and we had to rework their mortgage. But another family had to move out of the area because of a domestic violence situation. So we bought the property back. She was able to take the money that she had put into that mortgage and move out of the area and start a new life. Had she been renting, she wouldn't have been able to do that. So that's one of the benefits as well.
So I'm going to go to the other side of the market here and talk to you, David, and say, so if you had a lot of the tools that were talked about this morning in terms of flexibility with parking and ability to do multiple units, what are some of the price points that you could hit without the subsidy that we've just talked about? So in other words, what could we potentially naturally serve in a market like Arlington for missing middle?
You know, I think the most obvious opportunity that I see right now is in this sort of quadplex. You know, you take something that maybe used to be a duplex, or you work within some of the R zones that already exist, and you build one-bedroom units. And I think that you're going to be able to build them for about it'd be $250, $280 a foot. And you can then either go into a rental structure, or if you're going to sell them, I would tell you, as I look at underwrite a project, I'm going to set it up to make at least 20%. And so if my cost is, keeping it simple, if it's $250, then I want to exit out at $300 a foot. And if I'm selling 650 foot units, we'll have to do the math real fast, but there you go. That's going to wind up being, I think $300,000 or so.
So around $300,000, and you said that this would be a one-bedroom kind of scenario?
I think so. It'd be a lot of good architects in the audience. Some of them can figure out how to squeeze out, even in 750 feet, they might even figure out a second bedroom. The key drivers there are, we want to try to avoid having to put an elevator in. You want to look at not only what's the jurisdiction call for, what does Arlington call for with respect to parking. You want to look at the financial markets and what's my lender going to say I have to do with respect to parking. And the lenders are kind of all ears, by the way. They want to hear if you defend your case for why you're not building perhaps one space per unit. And I think, especially around the Washington metro area, there are plenty of examples of successful projects parked at less than one space per unit. And I think what we want to do there is just simply document those successes and talk to our lender and say, we're providing 2/3 of a space per unit. So, the net effect would be 2 of the units perhaps don't come with a space.
Sure. So that's a perfect opening to ask Richard, what's your experience on whether how parking comes into play?
Yeah, I haven't seen that to be a problem. Like he mentions, the lenders really aren't going to sit there and place that as a reason not to do it. I think they're looking more for the cost in the neighborhood thing as far as the development goes. So no, that has not been a problem. It's been trying to find the person to put into that. The 300 is not a problem. The price you mentioned, it's typically the condo fee. If it's a condo, if it's like $500, the sale price is not a problem. You add the condo fee on, and then all of a sudden, the people that can afford it are typically above the price point where you're saying you want to keep it at 60. So then you get into the 80. So if you can build it where I guess you had some that were lower and some that were higher, easy to say, hard to do. Now, how does the county sort of say, do two of them to higher end, same unit, same place, exactly. Do some to lower, that doesn't work out as far as fair, but that's an idea that we were saying how the county has to look at the missing middle and say, what are we going to do? Are we going to allow them to put in lower cost ones next to higher cost ones? They've tried it. I don't think it works.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about condo fees a little bit. I mean, I think this conversation isn't only about homeownership, because the missing middle housing can produce a lot of rental housing as well. There are a lot of opportunities for home ownership though, and they very frequently are condominiums, the way that the structure works. And for Robert and Noemi, how much of what you do is condominium, and when you're doing this scale of, and particularly sort of moderate income condominium development, how is the condo fee, how does that condo fee affect the affordability for the people that you serve? Are you able to keep those condo fees low and manageable?
Well, we've done mixed income, so the cost to build one unit or another is the same, but we do charge higher for the higher AMIs.
A higher condo fee?
No, the higher
Higher
purchase price,
sales
sorry.
price, okay.
The condo fee is the same for everyone, but we do structure the mortgage for our typical homeowner to be a little lower so they can afford the condo fee.
Okay. And Robert, what's your the condo fee situation in your projects?
Yeah, in the projects where we have units that are in condominiums, we have been fortunate to work with private developers in developing those units who were able to get some upfront subsidy dollars through DC government that help effectively buy down the reserve that was needed, which in turn reduced what would be higher condo fees. We haven't run into an issue with that. Cooperatives have a similar structure when it comes to fees, and we also haven't run into an issue there. In a cooperative, the cooperative votes on what their fees are going to be, which helps. It's a plus and a minus, because you're voting with your residents about how you're going to raise your fees or lower them, and co-ops can run into a challenge around their reserve if they're not careful. But we haven't seen that as an issue, but we do factor it in when it comes to the affordability.
Okay. So I want to ask a couple more questions, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience for questions, because we're coming up on the end of our day. This has been great. So we have, like I started out saying, a variety of folks on the panel, variety of types of developers. The three of you over here have talked about the projects that you have done individually. Can you talk a little bit about what the potential might be if you were to collaborate across nonprofit and for-profit boundaries, whether you've done that before, and like I said, what some of the opportunities might be? So we'll start with Noemi.
We actually have done that before, not in Arlington County, but we've done it in Fairfax, where we've partnered with other developers who have to have affordable housing within their project. So they come to us and we provide that. We've worked in various ways. One where they just give us the land, they segregate it in a way, and then we build, but we build it to look just like everybody else. We're not singled out. So our homes look like the developers' homes. It's just the interior then that's a little bit different. We might not have the stainless steel appliances. We have just a regular, appliance. But nobody else knows that. Then we just structure the mortgage like we normally would.
Okay.
And then we've also partnered with Fairfax County, where they were doing a development, and we came in and provided the affordable homes.
Okay. And so you folks?
Yeah, I'm working with the same partner I had for my project in Clarendon. We're building 182 condo units in DC right now. And under inclusionary zoning, we'll be putting in 16 affordable units, some of them at 60%, some at 80%. And here we've got an example of a site that's just under 2 acres. We'll be doing concrete high-rise construction, which is very efficient once you've got up over 8 floors. And our cost of construction just simply makes it worthwhile and straightforward enough that we understand we're going to have 16 units where we're not going to make any money. In fact, a few of those will actually, we'll lose money if you're just on a per unit basis. But considered in total, it works great. And so then we're looking for the jurisdiction to make sure they've got a good, robust program for how to administer subsidized, affordable ownership units, and and what happens at resale, and so in this case we'll be totally relying on the district to make sure they know exactly how to administer that program.
So if you partnered, in your case you're partnering with the district, but if there was a nonprofit that you could potentially partner with, that nonprofit could play that role of helping steward those
Yep.
moderate income or affordable units. And Robert, what about your experience with partnering?
Similar, we've worked with private developers, particularly on condominium projects, cooperatives as well, and nonprofits that are locally based. And we're a big believer in sticking with what our expertise is. For instance, when it comes to homebuyer education, we do not do our own homebuyer education. There are well-qualified groups in DC that do that, and we contract with them to provide that. So we're very big believers in partnership and collaboration.
Great. So before I pass it over to everybody else to ask some questions, I just want to give each of you an opportunity to say if you could think of one or two things that you think are the biggest opportunities that you've heard today that could be used in Arlington County to help serve more middle-income households. Either what's the opportunity or what's the policy change that would need to happen?
Well, I would start with sort of what I was emphasizing about trying to have, like we talked about the MyPAP program that goes up to 60, to try and stretch it to some other version where it goes 80 to 100, so you have a twofold system. And I believe City of Alexandria has one where for certain income they get one amount, for higher incomes they get a smaller amount, but that way you're not just helping the 60 and below, you're going up to 80 or 100 with other funds that maybe the county has or can get from developers. So you're sort of giving everyone sort of a little bit of help with this shared equity program that MyPAP uses. That would be my best advice, or that I would say.
Great. Noemi?
Well, it's interesting because we keep talking about how we're building smaller to be able to build more units. But we serve families, and that 750 square foot unit just doesn't work for a family of 4. So we need to find other ways to bring more families into the area. So maybe, revisiting the ADU, we do have a project out there where it was accessory dwelling unit. I'm sorry, yeah, where it was a senior who had a large home. He didn't need that anymore, so he built an accessory dwelling unit for himself, and then brought in a family to live in the home. And that's part of his income too. He's gaining income. He rents it out to a family, and he lives in the back. So cooperating in that way might be a way.
And actually, I forgot to ask this, so I'll just butt in on your final comments here. One of the accessory dwellings in this gallery out here is a Habitat.
Correct.
Can you just give the 30-second version of what that is, so people can have an idea of how that works?
Sure. So it's a program that's in the Habitat in Santa Clara. They have a similar situation as we do. They don't have any more land that they can just develop or acquire. So they're trying to work within the confines of what they have, and they have a lot of single-family homes with an aging population that doesn't need that large home. So Habitat has worked with some of these homeowners who are in a fixed income. The Habitat comes in and builds the accessory dwelling unit for them. They then have a mortgage for that building that the Habitat constructed, but it's subsidized by the house that they used to live in, by the rent that they're incurring. So.
Great. So I'll pass it down, Robert. So the one or two things that we should do?
One, it's just not necessarily a policy or program. I would put this thought out there, which has come up a lot both nationally and locally for us, which is fundamentally, I think our economy is shifting in some ways where there are things we think now about sharing that we wouldn't have thought of sharing years ago. And generationally, this came up in the last panel. When I look at, I'm very fortunate that on our staff, we have a lot of younger staff. They share things that we just fundamentally wouldn't have thought about. So the idea of sharing equity, the idea of a cooperative, the idea of other forms of sharing in housing is a fundamental difference, but how can you factor that into ways that the philosophy is changing?
And I took careful note and made Daniel's comments about sharpening the pencil and looking, and this is something Arlington would be very good at, looking at certain areas where Arlington leadership can identify where missing middle would fit, then look at careful ways to incentivize the creation of the kinds of units that really address the missing middle, and I think it's just totally doable. I look at C2 property up and down Lee Highway and Columbia Pike, and it's just begging for that tool, so that we wind up with exactly what we want, not and we're not disappointed at the end.
Joel has the mic again. Where did he go? Okay, so our first question.
Good morning. My question is, Arlington County has over 20,000 condominiums as part of our about 100,000 unit housing stock. They have an average price value of about $325,000. In a sense, they are our existing middle-income home ownership resource. However, a lot of them were developed in the 80s. They're undercapitalized. They're not meeting current FHA standards for first-time home buyers, and they're kind of shadow rental properties. Does anyone on the panel have suggestions on how we can preserve and enhance that resource for first-time home buyers and middle-income households?
Well, I'll take one stab at it, but I'd love to hear some other opinions. I couldn't make it all the way through Econ 101, but the first few months of it, I learned about supply and demand. And we, in Arlington, through, our own caring about Arlington so much, we often restrict supply to the point that demand far outstrips it, and therefore driving prices up. So we've got to be constantly looking for opportunities to increase that supply and not be so reticent to increase the supply side.
So how about the existing condominium situation? Noemi, do you want to address that?
We've looked at this many times. We would love to be able to work on some of those, but just the capacity to get all those homeowners to work together is beyond us. We wouldn't be able to do that, but we certainly could do all the physical managing the project and working with the homeowners, but just getting them together would be difficult for us. And
Yeah, I think it's a pretty big problem to crack, because the county really doesn't have enough money and would be willing to put enough money to make it affordable to the average person. I mean,
But they are currently naturally affordable.
right, but they're aging.
But aging,
They are
so, yeah,
aging,
how do
that's
you-
true.
How do you steward that stock? And Nina mentioned the condo financing requirements, so FHA,
Right.
Fannie Mae rules.
Well, there's, Arlington
those
has a
changes?
class, they have a class on condo ownership for home buyers and for condo
But
associations,
these are not owner occupied.
owner occupied. This is investment.
They're
Most of them are.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, there are programs to help fix them up and renovate, but typically not on condos. So if you there's FHA programs, you can go in and renovate a house and owner occupy it and build it into the cost, but it does not work on condos.
those rehab programs, that's not a condo.
It doesn't work on condos. So it'd be more of a group effort, like he was mentioning. If the condo came together and said, we want to like rehab it and sort of refinance it and put it back into it, that can be done, but I don't see them all coming together. Not a big 100, 200 people.
Yeah, I want to go back to my question about the public employees and how can we get them to live in this community. I don't think because they are middle income, they may not want and they might have family, so that they might be interested in a fourplex or a sixplex or something rather than a condo. And how do we make that possible? And somebody started talking about Fairfax County having housing for their public employees.
Fairfax does have some programs and has taken on some workforce housing. In some of the developments, they make the developers set aside some units. So I know the county can do it. I think if the county employees, I know the Teachers Association is very vocal. If they spoke up and said there's a need, the county would say maybe we should focus on sort of setting aside either some units, because they have developers come in and say, we want to build, so we can give you money or we can set aside units. If they maybe decided that some could be for teachers, which they may already do, then that's a way to sort of incentivize a builder to say, we'll give you whatever you want. We can give you money, or we can give you units, and you can use them. But I think it has to be a grassroots program where someone has to speak up and say, you know, we teachers, we firemen, we policemen, you know, we'd like to live here too. We need help, since this isn't going to be solved by ourselves. It has to be some county help, and it may not be cheap, but I think it's cheaper to help a policeman live in a neighborhood than to have them commute in and have a problem. So where do you put your money? Do you help them buy a home? Do you get someone to help?
That's how we've partnered with Fairfax County.
Yeah, and Fairfax, the same thing. So the two have to get together and have a sort of higher level meeting saying, we, the county, can't do it. Can you come in and help us? Can a builder come in and set aside some? We'd love to help these teachers.
You know, this might be a can that we only open very carefully, but I think anywhere we look at parking lots, whether it's parking lots on a school property, parking lots on a fire department property, maybe it's aprons of where the trucks go in and out. There's perhaps an opportunity to build above that, and you could partner with the private sector developer, and you could say some of these are market rate and some of these are set aside for teachers, firemen, you know, cops, the what have you. And that's tricky because perhaps the neighbors weren't expecting something like that to happen. But this is so important, isn't it? And then in this metro area, it's not unrealistic that some of these crucial workers are coming in from Prince William County, for instance, and that it'd be great to get creative and help them stay right here.
Are there any more questions? And is this working yet? Hello? Oh, hello. So if we don't have any more questions, then I'm going to say thank you to our panel here. And we are going to invite, when you guys get all your unmiked and everything, while you're doing that, we're going to invite Mike Geary up from Geary O'Hara Family Foundation to give us some closing comments.
I want to thank everybody for coming. And I hope that we go forward and try to make a lot of these ideas into a reality as we go forward. So once again, thanks everybody, and thanks for coming.